Jai Hind, Jai Bharat, and welcome to Dev Talks. This is Aadi Achint. I'm honored to have on the platform once again the former Foreign Secretary of Bharat, Mr. Kanwal Sibal, who's going to try and tell us and help us understand what is this game that India is now trying to play with the US. We have taken some hard stands. Let's try and interpret it. Is there a change in policy, or is this just a time being sort of a response? Sir, namaskar. Welcome to the show.
My, my pleasure.
So, sir, firstly, let me ask you this: how do you kind of see the response to the US? Firstly, let before that, the whole bunch of interference, if I may take the liberty of saying that, coming in from the West with regards to our elections. How do you look at that, and what would be your observations? Is this normal?
It is not normal because they are clearly taking sides. There seem to be some concern about Prime Minister Modi and the BJP winning the landslide election, which means that his leadership will become stronger. India will become stronger, more self-confident. It will be less prone to accept pressure from the West. Will follow a more independent policy. Will buttress its strategic autonomy. Um, will push back. Uh, so they will lose uh, the kind of, you know, I won't say control, but nevertheless, some degree of control through civil society, through opposition, through the media, all those uh, elements in society which can counter a strong government at the center. In any democracy, there always will be dissenting voices and elements which, because they're not in power, would like to undermine the government and create space for themselves. Uh, Now, for example, this whole issue of some foreign ambassadors who avowedly said that when they come to India, they will uh, pay a lot of attention to sub-national diplomacy. Now, what does sub-national diplomacy mean? I mean, the phrase is pregnant with meaning because the job of a foreign representative is to deal with the national government, not with
Yes.
sub-nationalism. And if you're going to deal with sub-nationalism, the message is very clear. You're going to try and weaken the hold of the central government over the national polity and build up regional forces and build up their own regional nationalism. And when you talk about engaging the civil society, which they say openly, even the latest report of the State Department's human rights says that this report has been Gilchrist, Ambassador Gilchrist said, this report has been based, among other things, on contacts that they've had with civil society in India and civil society here, meaning in the United States of America. Uh, so this is an instrument they use, and they've used civil society uh, successfully in regime change efforts in many parts of the world. And even if the regime change hasn't occurred, they have sowed enough domestic discord and even civil war as a result of this. So it is in this background that these articles are appearing. They are not fools. They know that this is on the eve of elections, and all of what they are saying actually strengthens the opposition, their arguments, and encourages them to believe that they have the ear and support of powerful Western elements. But they do it at the same time. They are very, very sensitive about any interference in their electoral process to the point even of sanctioning countries. And it's not only the United States, Europe itself has been talking a lot about interference by Russia in their domestic elections through social media, through local elements, individuals, and this and that. So while they're very sensitive about interference in their elections, but they are not at all hesitant to take positions and say things which can be rightly construed as interference in our elections. For example, Kejriwal. What is their interest in Kejriwal? Is he, if he was the only figure ever in India's democratic history who was arrested or charged with corruption or etc. etc. And it was something really unique. I can understand, but there are so many politicians who've suffered this fate, but have they taken up that case? So what is their interest in Kejriwal? Similarly, they're talking about blocking of some accounts of the Congress party, and that this might interfere in their electioneering and this. And what is their interest in the Congress party funds? And where is the assumption, and why the assumption that what has been done is contrary to law
Mm.
or cannot withstand the scrutiny of our judiciary? They talk about a free and fair and transparent trial. The implication there is that they're not sure that this will happen, and therefore they have to state this openly and publicly in order to sensitize the government. We are watching you, and we're watching the judiciary, and we are already saying that we looking for a fair and transparent trial. So it's a power game. There is no
Mm.
morality, nothing of that kind. The postures they adopt with regard to their superior political and moral ethics is complete nonsense. In fact, their record is terrible, terrible in terms of violation of human rights. Okay, for a moment, let's accept, though, mind you, one can say a lot of things about what's happening in the United States, particularly uh, the two things which are very recent. One is the protests in the campus and the manner in which the police is suppressing them physically. Can you imagine if the Indian police was actually to get hold of women and push them on the ground and then try and put manacles on the wrists behind their backs? Huh? There'll be a uproar in India, uproar.
Mm.
But this is happening. I've seen videos of that.
Yep.
That is one. The other, of course, what's happening in Gaza now.
Hmm.
We have very good relations with Israel. We are terribly against terrorism. We sympathize with them genuinely. When the October 7 attacks occurred, we've not seen the end of terrorism. And we know that if we indirectly uh, give the impression that for us, the October 7 was totally unacceptable and everything else after that is justified, would be a serious mistake, politically and morally. The fact is that uh, the manner in which Gaza has been destroyed and the number of people killed goes far beyond retribution for a genuinely unacceptable terrorist attack on Israeli civilians. Uh, and the United States is overlooking this, supporting this. Germany is doing that. Uh,
Even the Middle East, for some reason.
there is no effort to stop this. So suddenly, whatever instruments in their control uh, are either not workable or they don't use them. Whereas when it came to Russia, they adopted a whole panoply of sanctions, terrible sanctions, including declaring the president of Russia. Can you imagine? A war criminal. And now EU Parliament has just passed a resolution de-recognizing the election of Putin. Can you can you imagine that? As if the EU Parliament has elected Putin, and therefore they can de-recognize the election. It's the Russian people who have done that, and it's such a bad precedent. They can do it to any other country they don't like,
Yep.
any leader they don't like, and it reduces their own credibility. Uh, and um, so, coming back to your specific question, I would say that this interference in our internal affairs before the elections is on account of the fact that, as I said earlier, uh, the landslide victory of of BJP under Prime Minister Modi, and if they get 370, I don't know if they will, and uh, if, as Prime Minister says, whatever done in the last 10 years was just a trailer, there's much more to do, which means that all the timelines he has drawn up, all the ambitions and aspirations he has, he will go full steam to achieve that. And with everybody agreeing, India will become the third largest economy by 2027, leaving behind Germany and Japan. think that this could be a matter of concern to some people that
Mhm.
India is not strictly within our camp.
Yeah.
It's part of BRICS, it's part of SCO. It has resisted pressure on Russia, doesn't enforce sanctions on Russia. It wants to be a leader of the global south, and therefore it will become more unmanageable. And the shift in global economic and political power, which has already occurred, and this towards the east, will become even stronger. Uh, and therefore, in that perspective, what should one do? On the one hand, they can't abandon India because if, let's say, the relationship with India, I won't say collapse, but let's say deteriorated, then you have a situation where the West is pitted against Russia, China, and India. Then what is left in terms of global power? Just transatlantic. So, so the entire structure that was created after 1945, where the transatlantic powers dominated the world, had hegemony, that will be broken further. India actually is preventing that from happening by
Mm.
having a foot in both camps, trying to improve relations and actually doing so with the United States and Europe.
Mm.
So, so at that level, I'm sure their strategists understand the value of India, and that's why the U.S. National Security Advisor even recently said that it's the most consequential relationship for us in the 21st century because they see what is going ahead with the expansion of BRICS and everything else. On the other hand, uh, the elements in their academic think tank, media community, and I suppose intelligence community have a different view of India.
Yep.
Now, I can't for a moment believe or accept that there is such a wide uh, gap between what the government thinks and what the media academics and the think tanks think that they can follow two parallel policies. I don't think so. Because especially in the US, not so much in Europe, people are constantly moving from think tanks at least and the academic world into positions of power, real power within the
Mm.
system. Back again. So once they are in the think tanks and in the academic world and even some in the media, whatever views and thinking they have, they bring it along with them when they move into government. They, they,
Correct.
they can't have split personalities, whereas media people, think tank people, they have a certain view, but when they came into office, they had totally different view. It can't be.
Different.
They bring along with them all the prejudices that they have. So, so therefore, I think the idea is that at another level, they want to keep signaling to India that we are watching you, uh, and there's a risk involved for you to go too far in the other direction. So they want to maintain this pressure point. And finally, in terms of narratives, they created this narrative uh, about India backsliding of democracy and violation of human rights, uh, persecution of minorities, capture of institutions, and all that. But now this is now the current narrative. Everybody sort of plays to this tune. Nobody wants to analyze the reality
Nope.
because this is a narrative which is now sanctified, if you like.
Mm.
Uh, and and the pity is that they control this narrative.
Yep.
We may in India uh, reject it, react against it, but who will listen to us? We can't capture the global narrative. It's the West that still controls the global narrative. And in this context, I remember the interview that Tucker Carlson had with Putin, and and Carlson asked Putin the question that there is this narrative against you. So why don't you do something to change the narrative? So Putin said, yes, we can do it, but the amount of effort and money and everything else we need to put in would be enormous, and the narrative won't change
Yep.
because the West controls the narrative. And this is the same problem with us. I mean, assuming that Hindustan Times or or the Indian Express or the Times of India wrote editorial questioning United States and this and that. Do you think anybody in the United States will take any notice? Or will they quote that to say, look, we need to change our policies because
Hmm.
the world is watching us? But our, and this comes to my the other point, which I feel very upset about at times, is our press. They seem to still defer to the views the West has of India, and they
Yeah.
amplify these views, uh, and they give prominence to them. Uh, they buy into their narrative as a way to put their own government on the defensive. Uh,
Mm.
so actually, we lose two ways. In two ways. One is that the views that may come into in our media, we express in the media, carry no value in terms of defining narratives. But our press actually consolidates and amplifies the Western narrative about India. Moment there's something critical, immediately our press carries,
Mm.
the news in several columns, and they seem to derive some kind of malicious pleasure from this.
That indeed, sir. Some sort of a pleasure indeed. I mean, that's something which I think you've hit the nail on the head. But I want to take you to this human rights report before I go into the retort that India has done. The human rights report, rest all fine. I've read the rest, and I've read it too many times. I've heard it too many times for me to get surprised. What surprised me is this section, and allow me to just read out a certain amount of section. It talks about anti-Semitism right there. The heading is anti-Semitism, and it says the Jewish community was estimated to comprise about 4,650 people. There are certain people which are known as the Mahanese people in the Indo-Tibetan border that were subjected to some sort of a violence during the Manipur protests. So they go on to describe that. Then they say government officials made public statements and released social media posts alleging a certain opposition political party figure and diaspora leaders were connected to George Soros, playing an anti Semitic conspiracy theory of an all controlling Jewish individual. So these words are literally mentioned in the report, and they call basically have termed us anti-Semitic. Uh, how do you see that? Considering in the light today morning, there's a report in the Wall Street Journal blaming George Soros for the protests happening in America as well.
This is unprincipled. I mean, the one country in civilizational terms which has never been anti-Semitic and will have no reason to be anti-Semitic is India. Uh, the I mean, we cite the fact that during the Roman Empire, the Jews sought shelter in India, which is true. Uh,
Yep.
there has been a sizable, relatively sizable Jewish community. Many of them migrated to Israel when Israel was formed. But there is absolutely no anti-Jewish sentiment in this country. On the contrary, uh, the present government, at least, uh, for long, has had great admiration for Israel and the manner in which our relations with Israel have expanded leaps and bounds and Israel has become a major defense partner.
Yes.
It is on account of the fact that we view Israel very positively. And it's not merely in terms of defense and anti-terrorism support in terms of technologies and all that we can glean from them, but in some other areas, agriculture and all, there is some degree of admiration also the way Israel has been able to reclaim arid and semi-arid and and desertic land in which they have and made it bloom. And then they have developed certain technologies which are very important, which is why we've gone along with this IT YouTube business
Hmm.
and the IMEC corridor, in both of which Israel will participate on. Uh, Now, Soros is a highly controversial figure. If you remember, uh, Jaishankar had commented on Soros himself that we would dismiss him as kind of an old man with certain pet hobbies.
Opinionated.
was opinionated. But the point is, he brings money to it
Yeah.
and the resources to it. And then I saw his speech in Davos, gratuitously talking about backsliding of democracy in India, uh, and then funding uh, those elements in civil society and think tanks and others who would advance his agenda. And it's not only limited to India. Well, he's Hungarian by
Yeah.
origin, but look at what Viktor Orban says about him. He lashes out at George Soros. Uh, Recently, he's done that because he's got this notion that somehow he has to develop a democracy all over the world, and if there's any backsliding of democracy, he has a moral responsibility to combat that. And then, if you look at his own past, unprincipled ways in which he made money, which he avowed himself
Yep.
that
Hmm.
that he actually was betraying the Jews because that suited his interests at that time.
Hmm.
And then this short selling and everything else, he made a huge amount of money out of this. And not only uh, his effort through the Hindenburg and all that, but also in Singapore and some other places that at the moment I don't recall, but I have read about that, how much money this guy had made through short selling, totally unprincipled and devious financial ways. For this man then to claim that he has some kind of a uh, moral role to promote democracy is laughable, frankly. But there it is. And for the State Department, if I heard you correctly, to bring in Soros into this and our attacks on Soros as some kind of anti-Semitism on our part is absolutely ridiculous. That whoever wrote that road should be ashamed of taking this line. There's nothing anti-Semitic in it at all. If you and the people who written the report know what our historical attitude towards the Jews is and towards Israel is. So how can they deny that reality?
And the funny thing is that they come out with this. So let's get into the responses now. The first response to this, where we've kind of said we attach no value to it, and I kind of updated in my own words. That was probably a little harsh of me. I say it's not worth the paper it's printed on. So how do you see that particular response, and is it the same response that we've been giving to these human rights reports? Because we know Human Rights Watch is again a Soros entity which comes out from there. So it's quite nice that he's putting a victim card for himself in that report.
Well, insofar as the report is concerned, first of all, it's an annual report.
Hmm.
So it's not as if it has any link to elections in India. But coming out at this point in time, just before the elections or while the elections are being held, um, it has a certain resonance
Yep.
in India,
Hmm.
political resonance, which is not helpful. Uh, Therefore, the timing of it compelled us to retort. And instead of getting into some kind of a defensive mode to say, no, 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 we have an independent judiciary, we have we observe the constitution, we have rule of law, etc., etc. Uh, the sort of things we were saying earlier when these reports came. This time it
Hmm.
has been blunt and sharp, basically saying that um, it is some word they use. Uh, we attach no, uh, we
We
attach
attach
no,
no value to it, sir.
and also there's some um, that we've seen reports on the matter and have been following related. No, that is different. No, he said that yeah, this report is deeply biased and reflects a poor understanding of India. We attach no value to it and urge you to do the same. So I think it's short and sweet and hard to the point, and dismissing it with the contempt it deserves.
Amazing. I mean, and sir, have we done this kind of a response before, which is
Yes, we done, but
seemingly?
we, no, not as pithy and hardcore as this one, because as I said earlier, it was more defensive. This is not defensive.
Hmm.
This is treating it with contempt. I mean, here is a document which the State Department produces every year, and Secretary of State Blinken has in the past has been introducing it, and last year or year before, I think it was last year, for the first time, the Secretary of State himself, while commenting on the report, singled out reference to India. This was a departure from the past. No Secretary of State had done that before. This time it is that Ambassador Gilchrist who presented the report. Uh, so I think we've done well in terms of just saying we attach no value to a document which the United States produces every year and feels great pride in doing so as some kind of a moral leader of the world, which has been given some right by someone to uh, watch over democracy and human rights all over the world, with no reference to what they do themselves and no
Hmm.
accountability with regard to what their own violation of human rights all over the world are. And he says in his reports that we continue to talk with India on these matters. And I suppose uh, they have to play to the gallery back home because they've created such a situation for themselves that they can't now step back and
Hmm.
say they're no longer the watchdog of human rights all over the world, because they created an entire ecosystem in which the, the human rights issue has become central next to LGBTQ as the core of U.S. foreign policy. So for us to say it has no value to it is a slap in the face of,
Hmm.
of the
There's a
State
huge
Department.
section on that as well. So, by the way, LGBTQ. I say, why don't you just you've added every other alphabet, just say LGBTQRSTWXYZ. Let's just finish it off,
Yeah,
because now the next thing will be maths is as it is racist. I'm sure the alphabet is also going to become racist. So
yeah.
it's it's a very interesting time, sir. But we also see the State Department kind of backing away from making any comments during their daily briefings. Uh, there was a that Pakistan that Bangladeshi journalist attached to the Jamaat. I forget his name. He asked a question about the Indian elections and this and that, and the spokesperson said that we don't send any observers to advanced democracies. This happened about 2 3 days back. Yesterday, that the same Pakistani journalist asked them again about this whole Australian journalist allegedly being thrown away from India. Again, the State Department turned around and says, we'd let India answer about its own visa policies. So we also have this where normally there would have been a very funny comment coming in from the State Department spokesperson. These are very measured responses. Why is that, sir?
I think they are beginning to sense that India is getting upset by their uncalled for interference in such minor matters. After all, look, in the realm of foreign policy issues, geopolitical issues, America's role as a preeminent power in the world, do you think these things, these petty, insignificant, minor things matter geopolitically? If an Australian journalist violates a visa uh, terms, conditions, and is trying to create uh, how should I say, uh, misunderstandings or 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 uh,
Disturbing atmosphere.
or or kind of incite communal
Hmm.
Sikh Hindu business and Khalistan business. And then, of course, as has been now revealed, it had nothing to do with her visa. Her visa did get extended, although it was at the last minute, but it did get extended. And now it appears that she had got married and she's changing her job and everything else. So those details have come out. And in this regard, although you didn't ask me the question, I find it unacceptable on a very minor issue like this, leave aside the State Department, I'll come back to that, that the foreign correspondents in India write a petition to the government in trying to
Yeah.
cow us
Hmm.
down. And to my mind, of course, I will leave it to the better judgment of the government. They should pick up one or two the most egregious fellows and not renew their visas. So as to send a message that we're not going to get bulldozed by you or cowed down by you. You have to learn to behave. This John Reed of FT, that Hannah, somebody from The
And Alice
Guardian,
Peterson. Hmm.
uh, they are insufferable people. Anyway, coming back to the State Department, so they have realized that India is now reacting very sharply, and therefore they didn't want to wade into this on issues on which they would be legitimately criticized. I mean, if a ABC journalist uh, is her visa actually did get renewed, but if she had to leave under pressure, how is it a issue of U.S. foreign policy?
Hmm.
Or the other uh, incident where the other Bangladeshi fellow, what did he ask? It's a Bangladeshi journalist. You mentioned that
Yes.
they all
He's
they all,
he's got a certain problem, I guess.
no. There was the other issue you mentioned. One was this.
Uh, so basically, he was asking about, this was the journalist, and he mentioned about elections, interference, the government kind of controlling the candidates, and there's a lot of oppression and this and that. So he spoke about that, and he said, "What is the US doing about it? Are you sending
Observers.
observers?"
Oh, he
Yeah,
just asked that question that in view of this and that, are you sending an observer? He says, well, we don't send observers to advance the democracy,
advanced democracies.
which is a sensible thing to say. Because if he had said that yes, we are sending observers, the 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 subtext is that they need to observe the fairness and free of Indian elections, whether they are
Hmm.
free or not. Uh, hmm? And therefore, I think his answer was very sensible. But the purpose of asking the question was very mischievous. That because Indian democracy is backsliding and there's so much criticism of suppressing the voice of the opposition, and the election commission is being questioned, and as well as the EVMs. Therefore, are you going to go there to observe these
Yeah,
elections? So I think for once on, on this issue, the State Department fellow gave a sensible reply.
that's there. So now let's come to the main point where we've come in. We've basically got the main controversy. Is that, you know have we ever, before the US, these protests in these universities, which are mind-boggling, by the way. It's interesting that there is no US citizen, very little of US citizens in those protests, and it's all immigrants. So I'm glad that their own bug is there to bite them. But have we ever, suo moto, kind of taken a decision of commenting on an internal affair, especially of a Western country, and putting across the same narrative of freedom of expression, peace, freedom, and
Yeah.
justice, and also so and so forth? So how do you
No,
analyze this?
I think there's a lot of irritation because of some of the statements the Germans earlier made and followed up the by the State Department or the White House, and they reiterated that. I think it was the White House spokesman, if I mistake
Hmm.
not, who reiterated the position even after our protest. Uh, so I think because of this mounting irritation, it, it was felt that perhaps that we should retort publicly. I'm sure that if and when if they have been raising issues of human rights in private, we've been pushing back and telling our side of the story. But that would be behind the scenes. Though, mind you, when the United States we raise these issues privately with India, it's not necessarily true that they do. This is also meant for public consumption.
Ah.
Uh, and I- okay, I have a particular incident in mind. When I was ambassador in Russia, Hillary Clinton had come, and she gave a statement to the press that she had raised human rights issues. There were some issues that they were concerned with regard to suppression of. Uh, no, it was a case of a journalist was
Hmm.
probing into what had happened in Chechnya and all that, and she had got killed. Anyway, she said that I've raised human rights issues in our discussion, and the Russian Foreign Office at a very senior level told me that this is not true. She did not raise anything. It is just for public consumption. So, judging from that, it's possible that when they do talk to us in private, it may be just perfunctory, and
Hmm.
because they know that there will be there will be pushback from our side. Um, but you're right. In this case, we've taken the lead and publicly uh, try to put them on the defensive by
Hmm.
telling that you've been supporting, CAA and other demonstrations uh, in India, and you never miss an opportunity uh, to to do that. And here in this case, what you're doing, although they didn't say it, but what you're doing is far, far, far more unacceptable by any standard uh, than uh, than what India has been accused of doing, of suppressing dissent, freedom of expression, etc., with police physically manhandling the protesters uh, and treating it as a serious law and order issue. Therefore, we have both with tongue in cheek, with tongue in our cheek, as well as more directly, um, we have said that democracies in particular should display the understanding in regard to other fellow democracies. After all, we are all judged by what we do at home and not
Hmm.
what we say abroad. And then he says, we've seen reports on the matter and have been following related events. In every democracy, there has to be the right balance between freedom of expression, sense of responsibility, and public safety and order. Uh, so, uh, it's a good statement that we have made.
I when you were, I have a single question, which is the last one, sir, and which is basically two parts. One is, so how does this affect the overall relationship between the two countries? These are sparks. A lot of people say, "Oh, this has gone down the tube," and I've got these, you respond to many of these people on Twitter as well. These and I have, with no disregard to any of them, the analysts from a lot of these think tanks who kind of write, "Oh, it's down the tube, it's down the tube, it's down the tube." Um, Secondly, when they kind of do these things, and this is a rather philosophical question, when they play these games, do they not have the intelligence to kind of realize that they are playing to the gallery within India? Because what India wants to see is a strong leadership. Do they not understand this aspiration of the country, that every time they point a finger at the leader, he becomes more stronger? So, and every time they speak the same language as the opposition, they are, uh, for one reason or the other, clubbed with the opposition.
You know, from a hardcore point of view, uh, they could come to the conclusion that while they also need India, but India needs the United States
Mhm.
uh, for its growth and development, for meeting its aspirations, for modernizing its economy, um, developing capabilities and capacities in very critical areas. This whole business of emerging and critical technologies, semiconductors, artificial intelligence, what have you, or energy transition. issues, uh, the the equities that and defense, of course, the equities now that we have developed with the US are major ones,
Correct.
and therefore, on both sides, they would also think that while this part of the relationship will continue to move forward because it is being driven by hardcore national interest factors on both sides. There is the other part, the human rights and stuff like that, uh, where the United States uh, has been at it for a very, very long time,
Hmm.
and which is not going to change. It has become an integral part of their system. So they may believe that India will have to more or less lump it, and as policymakers, decision makers who look at the overall picture, they would allot this part its rightful place somewhere in the corner, while the larger picture remains what it is, positive, or at least the thrust remains positive. On our side, it will be the same calculation that simply because they issue inconsequential reports, which at the end of the day uh, does not change anything. People are in India not going to vote because the State Department has issued a report or a spokesman has said something. It has some echo in the English language press and in Delhi and some circle, but that's it. It doesn't go further than that. And therefore, India could also take the view that look, we have this larger picture where there's a huge gains that we can make from our relationship with the United States. And therefore, should we sacrifice that just because there are some irritants which may annoy us, but they don't go to the core of our being in our future? Because this doesn't make United States our enemy. It just makes United States
A dangerous friend.
a friend that irritates you, and a friend of whom you would be wise enough not to rely fully, but nevertheless.
Yeah.
So I think it is in that framework that these things probably is seen by both sides. And then the United States at the Sullivan level or the Biden level, they also send you contrary signals, which
Hmm.
are very positive.
The
Uh,
DOD, sir, for that matter.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So it is that. My own view is that we should strike back more and more,
Hmm.
and uh, and then treat this as part of sparring that we'll continue to do with the United States. But it need not affect the larger picture of the benefits that we could derive from this relationship
Hmm. Hmm.
in so many ways. Uh, so it will be a very pragmatic view of things uh, rather than get emotionally charged. Uh, Look at China. Huh? I think they have, because the United States does things to China which are far more. Today, I'm speaking. In the past, United States has done terrible things to us with sanctions and everything else.
Yeah.
But today, it's not the case. But vis-a-vis China, United States now has reversed its policies, and
Hmm.
China has issued maybe 1,000th of its warning to that it's unacceptable what you're doing, and we solemnly reject what you're saying. I don't know. There's some kind of a tropes they use, diplomatic tropes they use, which have absolutely no meaning because they reiterated them hundreds of times. So they issued a thousandth, maybe a thousand warning to United States, and yet they continue to maintain uh, close ties with the United States on the economic side. Of course, today there are edges to that relationship which were not there before. But
Hmm.
nevertheless, China has been accepting a lot of bluster from and criticism from United States on Uyghurs and everything else on Tibet, even while their economic ties were growing by leaps and bounds. After all, you remember they have appointed a special ambassador for Tibet, things like that. But the Chinese took it in their stride because even while they push back verbally pretty strongly.
Yeah. Mhm. So we need to become a little more thick-skinned, sir.
No, I won't say, well, if you want to put it that way, but I would say that not thick skinned, a little more self confident.
Mhm.
That if
Yeah.
America can play this game on the ground that this won't hurt the larger relationship, so we can retort on the same, keeping the same approach in mind that it will not hurt the larger relationship. So why let them have advantage, one-sided advantage?
This is an understanding of diplomacy, I guess, which comes only from experience. As civilians, we look at it in a binary.
I have a feeling, I might be wrong. Okay, let me put it this way. There was this huge phase of our relationship with the United States where they damaged us strategically, gravely.
Yeah.
Uh, and yet, uh, and we push back in our own way. After all, we went and became nuclear,
Hmm.
despite all the terrible warnings from everyone. We went ahead and developed our missile technology, despite all the bans and restrictions and everything else. On Kashmir, we did what we wanted to do. We didn't make any concessions, even when we were relatively weak. What I meant is that despite that past history of India resisting when we were weak, uh, and the relationship still continuing steadily on an upward trajectory, as is the case now, by the same logic, we can continue to defy the United States when it goes overboard with its totally unwarranted criticism and still maintain the positive trajectory of our ties. In other words, we have shown we can defy Russia, United States, without uh, closing the doors of improvement and expansion of ties. So the uh, same approach should guide us now as we become more self-confident, uh, and U.S. stakes in India have increased also, geopolitical stakes. We have room, and the sort of things that we are saying now, I hope will continue if the United States continues to pinprick us.
I think Mr. Modi is giving a little bit of a taste of his third term to these guys and saying, "Listen, that's what I'm gonna do. So be careful, recalibrate." But sir, thank you so much. That was an insight that I think, which was very important for us to understand. Uh, apart from the excitement and the pleasure that one got to see us responding for the probably the, as you said, the first time in terms of a suo moto response on an internal incident. It also shows that we want or aspire to be in a place that we would like to be a part of a global community. It's not something that we want to just shut our doors and sit in our this thing, which is what is a lot of these think tank types keep writing, that India is a very isolationist country where it's only concerned about its own interests. I think this also shows that we want to be a part of the global community, and we will say what we need to when we need to.
But how can they talk nonsense like saying that we are an isolationist country? I mean, on what
They do.
grounds? Our interaction with the rest of the world uh, has grown a great
Yes.
deal. A lot of our economy is now linked to the global market.
Hmm.
Our exports are growing, our imports are growing. Um the We are picking up the causes of the global south in the form
Global
of
South.
leadership. Uh, we we presided over the G20 very successfully. Uh, we are uh, we are in all these plurilateral organizations. We are present, whether it is SEO and BRICS and what have you, as well as the Quad, the larger Indo-Pacific concept, and the
Hmm.
ITU2 and the IMEC and everything else. So we are players on the international stage. So I don't know what this isolationist nonsense means. I mean, we are not isolating ourselves. And if
No.
our Prime Minister says that we want to be a leading country, not a swing state, uh, how do you become a leading country by isolating yourself?
Absolutely correct, sir. And our tagline is Vishwamitra. So it doesn't
And
really
also,
make sense.
when we are now, as you've seen our PR to UN,
Hmm.
she's been proactive in terms of the whole business of reform of the UN Security Council and its expansion. Now if you have aspirations like that, how is it isolationist?
It's not.
It's not.
Absolutely. I guess they only feel that somebody is involved if you sign on the dotted line of an alliance. And that's something that
Exactly.
is, yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
Thank you so much, sir. Always a pleasure talking to you and learning from you. And I hope to have many more interactions where we learn lots more. Till then,
My
Jai
pleasure.
Hind.
Bye. Bye.